Deputy President Paul Mashatile's VIP protection unit's assault incident has again brought back the issue of brutality in the country. Mashatile's VIP protection members are in hot water after a video showing them brutally assaulting 3 people on the highway in Johannesburg. The members have since been served with suspension notices, and IPID is investigating the incident. Now, to help us understand the psychological impact of police brutality, I have Jonathan Nell, who is a psychologist, who's joining us now in studio. Jonathan, thank you for making time for us. So when someone experiences that level of violence or assault, what's the impact on their psyche?
I think it's a really complex phenomenon that is being experienced in the sense that you know, the very people and institutions that we're relying on to protect you actually is having the opposite effect, or is doing the thing that we're trying to actually escape, you know, by relying on them. And so it's difficult to summarize it, but you know, it's not good. It's traumatic. And it's a problem.
Yeah.
You know, that, as I say, it's an institution that is meant to serve as a refuge that then becomes the source of the problem. You know, it kind of speaks to itself that the issue is extremely problematic.
And we have seen a number of incidents of police brutality, and I wonder if that shapes how we relate with the officers. So if these people we expect to be the protectors and enforcers of the law are actually violating the law and sometimes in the process assaulting us, does that not then even shape how we react to them, whether through do we respect their positions, or are we even comfortable enough to go and report crime to the very same people who often actually are the ones that violate us?
Absolutely. If one doesn't have trust in the process, you know, that it's going to result in something meaningful, and you know, it's the stakes are high. It's I think similar to if you go to a doctor and you don't trust that they're going to be able to help you. It is going to definitely impact in terms of whether you go to that person and what you expect from them. And so I think, to your point, in terms of if one expects that it's going to actually be harmful, I think the short answer as such is that you probably are going to stay away because in order to protect yourself, you know. So yeah, not having faith or confidence and trust in the process, it will definitely influence what one is going to do in interacting with that process.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't need that, especially in a country like ours where crime is so rife. What do you think the police need to do, especially when it comes to maybe counseling the officers? Because these are people that are also trained to, I mean, VIP protectors are highly trained to be brutal in their approach because they are protecting important quote-unquote citizens. And I just wonder if there's a need in the police system itself to take these people through counseling, because I imagine sometimes some of the things they have to be involved in protecting these political principles sometimes can be traumatizing to them. Do you think there's work that can be done in the police to try and get the police officers to start talking about their experiences?
I think it's far, if I can say, far more complex than that. So counselling, it's an idea, it's an option for them, but I'm not convinced that would be the route to go. Partially because it's a systemic problem. It's a systemic issue that's manifesting as such. And so in order to address that problem, one needs to understand what is leading to the problem. You know, so I think the counselling in and of itself would be useful, and training would be useful if it were within certain parameters, the problem, so to speak. But given what seems to be happening with specific reference to the incident that you've referred to, I think counselling, it's an easy answer, but I think it's also possibly short-sighted in who needs the counselling. Is it the perpetrator or the victim? You know, possibly both, but it's not going to address the the cause, as I say. So I think there's bigger questions that need to be looked at and understood in terms of the system that is resulting in this. Excuse me. One thing that comes to mind is accountability. So there's a lot of, I think, very complex issues that are interacting and resulting in this phenomenon as such.
Mm-hmm. What can the people who have been violated do in order to start dealing with that trauma? Where do they start? I mean, the people in the video, you can see how traumatized they were. They were not even fighting back, but these VIP protectors were going hard on them. Something like that can really traumatize you a great deal. Will it help to just talk to the counselor? Will it help to have them take some time off, talk to the people they trust about that experience? Will it help to even confront the perpetrators so they can tell them how they feel about what they've done to them? As a psychologist, and you look at someone who's gone through such an experience, what's your advice to them?
A good question, which means the answer is difficult. Again, counselling, it's probably helpful, but is it sufficient? And my guess would be, if we're going to make generalizations, it's probably not going to be sufficient. Because again, this goes back to the very institutions that we rely on to protect us. If they harm us, then for me it becomes a specific type of counselling that I think is beyond the parameters of psychological counselling. So, as I said, that's not to say that counselling or psychotherapy won't be helpful, but again, it's going to require a broad, in-depth, insightful response. So conversations like this, I think, are helpful. But for me, the question is, what does that translate into? And I don't think there are obvious answers as such.
Yeah.
These are social issues that it's going to require like a deliberate engagement with the people who are responsible. But I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Is that the people who are responsible and who are in these authority positions, they seem to find it difficult to mobilize that aspect of their responsibility, their duty towards the public.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult position because, put differently, do those victims need help? Absolutely, but I think it's got to be meaningful and it's got to be holistic.
Yeah, it's going to need a multifaceted approach, which already is underway. IPID is investigating. I think there are political parties that are called for accountability when it comes to the political principles that are often protected by these VIP protectors, because sometimes they are the ones that put pressure on them, sometimes to behave in this manner and drive in that manner. What impact does such violence have on our society? When we see it, or for those who sadly experience it, what impact does that have just on our society, which is often itself referred to as a violent society?
It is a violent society, and I think, again, in short, it creates a sense of fear. If one thinks about, from a micro level all the way to a macro level, meaning if one is pulled over by these authority figures, and one is not confident that it's going to be handled responsibly. And again, I think the overriding idea is that this juxtaposition of being protected as opposed to being harmed, it's going to elicit fear. And whether that's short-term fear or whether it's a case of a more protracted fear, and then of course you get all sorts of complications that come out of that. In terms of it spills over into. If we look at it from this angle, psychiatric symptoms, but also like maybe less severe, if I can put it that way, social issues. Like the one thing that comes to mind in terms of the abused or the victim often becomes the perpetrator. So if you are at the receiving end of this kind of treatment and behavior by people in this context, I think it makes for a dangerous scenario and a recipe and trajectory into that person, if for no other reason, out of a sense of helplessness, needing to respond in kind as such. So you're not going to protect me, this institution. I'm going to have to protect myself, and possibly against everyone. So that you can see the generalizations then become dangerous because everyone becomes an enemy, and it's understandable. Again, the institution that's meant to protect you becomes the enemy. It's not unfeasible that one could then, as a way to cope and manage through that, generalize and become hypervigilant and protective against everyone, or be on the offense as such, as opposed to being on the defense. So the point being that it's not just a case of this is not right, it's a problem that it occurs, but there's long-term sequelae to it. Mm-hmm. And again, I think that's part of what's missing in terms of the approach. It's seen as how do we treat it symptomatically, but we're not.
What are the root causes?
Yeah, we're not looking at the background and the substrate, that these things are built on and come out of as such.
Yeah, Jonathan Nel, thank you so much for joining us in studio.